Okay, so now we're transitioning to our post-game wrap-up session where we dig into some of the technologies presented today, as well as broaden the lens a little bit to talk about some trends in investing and some broader technology trends. So it's my pleasure to welcome back the Dragons. So thank you again, Suzanna, Feargal, and Sascha. So I'm curious, as you're listening to these pitches, what's the first thing that you're looking for? Is it the quality of the team? Is it the market size or opportunity? Is it the problem? So I'm curious to know what you all are thinking about as you're watching these presentations. I think we have Susanna's mic on mute. Susanna, can you unmute your mic? And maybe Sascha jump in while she's.
Yes, I can.
She's fixing.
So we're looking for two things. Number one is this team. Team for us is important, and we have learned in the last 15 years of investment that good teams can do miracles, and that they're very willing and able and capable of pivoting when it's required to pivot and adjust business models. But the other thing that's also important to us is the product and the market itself. And what we've learned the hard way in the earlier stages of the fund is that we've looked at very innovative product that was just too early for markets because consumers weren't ready to shop it. So we're looking at a combination of a stellar founding team that gels well together, and then the market product fit, and whether we see potential for it in markets.
Suzanna, I think you're back.
Yes, I'm back. So for us, it's obviously, Pete, you have already mentioned a lot of those factors. Team is very important. Quality of the people for early stage startups is the most important thing. That being a corporation, we definitely look at the idea. For me, running the startup investment program, I see many concepts running by my door. And so whether there's anything new, whether there's real innovation coming out of it, I would say we particularly like using new technology to solve problems, like whether it is travel experience, whether that is provider efficiencies. And so really combining that new technology angle but solving a real tangible problem. So I would say that is what I look for.
Feargal, how about you?
Yeah, I think all of those things, but I think also, to Susanna's point, it's got to solve a real tangible problem, but there's also got to be a clear path to how you're going to acquire customers, how you're going to generate revenue. And I think, quite often with startups, they have wonderful ideas of things that, have problems that have bothered them on their own travel experience and things that they want to fix, and come up with nice solutions sometimes for those. But it's not always easy to see the path from the concept into acquiring customers and generating revenues, and that I think is key, is important. And look, I think to Sascha's earlier point, where team is key, having a strong team, they'll get it really quick, and they'll also get the point that if their initial idea about path to revenue doesn't work as they planned, they'll be able to pivot fairly quickly.
Okay, and one thing that's
go ahead.
One
Sascha.
other thing that I'd like to add to it is because Suzanna picked up on innovation and technology. And I think innovation and technology is important to us, but what's also important is that we look at business models that do exist in industries that are just being done better. To give you examples, we've invested into booking hourly rates in hotels, which is something that the hotel industry has done for a very long period of time, but it hadn't gone online yet. Right? So we're looking for those niche pockets and opportunities where technology solves an existing problem, or where technology enhances an existing market further.
So let's kind of look at some of the themes that we saw presented today. So we saw a pretty diverse group of presenters, from folks that are using emerging technologies like blockchain. They're focused on pricing optimization, micromobility, niche OTA. So what are some of the biggest opportunities that you see just in general? And we can focus on some of the technologies that we saw today.
I think transportation is still. Sorry, go ahead, Suzanna.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I personally, as a fund that invests into travel and transportation, we still monitor the transportation industry. It's interesting to see that that none of the larger or smaller players have really solved that problem yet. It's a very interesting space with news every year in terms of somebody having a new concept or a new idea. So something that that we closely monitor, and I think has a lot of potential going forward, especially as we start going more green, where sharing becomes more important. And I would have thought so. Trains play a bigger role than they probably did a couple of years ago. So it's a very interesting sector. Then one other sector that I personally think, and I'm sorry to say that now, personally think is a bit overhyped, is the use of blockchain. And it's probably from an investor's perspective because we were told to believe years ago that blockchain would revolutionize everything, and here we are 4 or 5 years later, and it still hasn't really solved a world-term problem, and has shown that it can get traction. So I think they're two extreme. On one end, transportation and its vast opportunity. On the other side, a blockchain that still has to prove 4 or 5 years into it that it can help revolutionize the business model and industry.
So why do you think that is? Curious to know, and you can chime in, Sascha. Are we just too early in the cycle? Is it just the foundational technologies are too difficult to disrupt? What are some of your thoughts on that?
My immediate thought is when you look at what people are trying to solve with blockchain, they're trying to solve things that aren't fundamentally broken. Right. So a lot of the players that we see, they're trying to replace Booking.com by a blockchain solution, and have fun. I mean, besides the fact that marketing never comes for free, not even on the blockchain, you're trying to tackle a really big boy that has done really well in terms of positioning itself as consumers. What people are not doing are the very unsexy things in travel, right? I mean, I talked to a guy who really liked the concept that uses blockchain to deal with commission reconciliation. Right, where something needs to be really trusted, and and you shouldn't be altered because there's money involved, and with the blockchain is perfect because it allows you to process, to distribute, and to make sure it's secure. But those areas seem very unsexy to founders because they're not B2C and they're not glamorous and they don't attract lots of publicity. And I think once the hype factor around the blockchain has gone, we'll see that technology is actually used for something really useful in industries.
I think that's a very good point, Sascha, because to me, the whole blockchain thing is a little bit of a hype. Quite often investors throw in the word blockchain and think that automatically gets them valuation. As a user, as a customer, whether it's a consumer or a business customer, you really don't care that much about the technology and whether it's blockchain or something else. What you care about is what solution and how it's making the business process better. And to Sascha's point, I think sometimes people focus a little bit too much on the kind of the sexiness aspect rather than what is it we're trying to improve or make more efficient here.
I
Suzanna, I know
agree.
You've looked at a few blockchain companies over the last few years, I'm sure. What are your thoughts on blockchain?
No, I think Sascha and Feargal have already covered most of my points. Like, it is about ROI. Like if there's not a problem, then how can you just implement a new project because there's a new technology, but there's actually no tangible return? That's the question number one. Like, is there a real problem to be solved? And at the moment, there are a lot of hypes and overpromise. I actually believe that there are definitely part of the process that blockchain will be able to do better than traditional technologies. And I think we are experimenting with those. At the moment, like, blockchain still suffer from performance issues, and I think like as the technology, it is still maturing. So obviously, it's getting better day by day. But there are like many challenges that it still needs to go through. And so I would say there are a lot of promises. We continue to experiment. We continue to observe. We continue to talk to startups who are experimenting in this area. And we definitely look forward to finding like the niche or the area where blockchain will be performing better than existing technology. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, and I think one issue that the blockchain had is Bitcoin. I think it had a very prominent user of its technology in the very early days, like super hyped and excited people a lot. And I think that it just attracted people that thought that the blockchain is going to be revolutionary and quick and a key factor in getting funding. And I think what we've learned is that those early investments have shown that they haven't really paid off. And now people are slightly shying away from it, which is a shame because it is good from a concepts perspective. It just needs better business models.
Okay, so let's broaden the lens a little bit. So we all know that entrepreneurs thrive during times of crisis, and there are companies that are being founded today that will will really ramp up once we hit recovery. So I'm curious to know who's the next Airbnb and what problem are they tackling today?
Great question. I wish we know.
All right, maybe that's not fair, but what are the areas? What are the areas that are most ripe for disruption? And who's going to accelerate coming out of this pandemic?
I think from our perspective, like combining like personal experience with like professional experience, the startups that we are talking right now. One area that I have seen the fastest change is the use of paper. How fast that it is going away. So in the city that I live in, Madrid, like all the restaurants have already got rid of paper menu, and everywhere it is you point to a QR code and then you get your menu on the mobile phone. And I'd say that is probably like one of the area if I have to bet. Digitization, not only about paperless. That paperless is only one aspect of it. The entire touchless concept, once it's installed, it's not going to go away. Right. Once you have your digital passport, once you have your digital experience, the touchless experience that we have implemented today, this is not going to be rolled back. And I would say that is an area that I see a lot of acceleration in the current environment, and I think that is definitely an area to watch.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've invested into paperless hotel rooms years ago, and it's taken a long time to convince hotels that they should do, right? Besides the fact that some of the technology that's out there can replace remote controls, which is the most unhygienic item in a hotel room. I mean, it carries the most bacteria you can imagine. There wasn't really a lot of interest, but now with COVID, hotel guests or consumers, travelers have been made aware by experts on TV that sanitization is one of the most important things. So all of a sudden, that's technology that's being brought forward. Things that the hotel industry, the airline industry has been really good at in terms of implementing. I mean, I criticized them earlier in terms of not being able to adapt quickly and monetize. But one thing that the airline industry has been good at is automating the booking and check-in process, which the hotel industry has really lagged behind. Some parts due to regulation, but also parts because people didn't really see the necessity, and we're seeing that there's pickup in it. So I think Suzanna said it and summarized it already quite well, which is digitalization. Has progressed massively in areas where beforehand people were shy to make investments.
So as we shift, kind of think about the investment culture. To your point, Sascha, who is getting funded today, and why? Kind of going along with that concept. Is it all just solidifying existing portfolio companies, or is there investment going into new companies that you're all looking at saying this company has a real good chance of success coming out of the pandemic?
I mean, I think it's a question of what you want to look at. I mean, most of the rounds that we're seeing right now in the portfolio are follow-on rounds just to make sure that the 6 months that were killed in terms of growth by COVID, there's enough funding to catch this up in the following 6 months, because they all had plans, and in the next 12 to 18 months they would achieve certain numbers. Due to COVID, that won't be the case. Therefore, they generate less cash, which means they won't be able to last as long as they originally predicted. We are still seeing investments, new investments, and not as many as we saw probably prior, but there is still a good amount of deal flow that's coming in, and there are funding rounds. What I haven't seen is large funding rounds in early stage startups. The rounds that we see, in early stage, very early stage where we go in, are smaller than they were pre-COVID. But to be honest with you, it's only 3 months really into it, or 4 months really into it. If you take out the summertime, where venture capital is slow anyway. So I think we need to wait for September, October to see what the impact really is. Then one large thing on the larger transactions that we're seeing, very hard to judge. I mean, Sonder was mentioned a couple of times in the news, and also during this event here. And I wish somebody would be honest about the fact how much of the 170 million that they've raised is really just to make sure they can sustain the burn that they had prior to the pandemic, right? So that's going to be very hard to figure out. So I'm less wowed by larger raises right now, because I find it very difficult to judge whether that's really innovation that's being invested into, or just dealing with post-COVID issues.
Feargal, anything from your side on the investment culture and and also valuations is a big part of it too, right? So we've shifted from a seller's market to a buyer's market, so the leverage is all on the capital side.
Yeah, well, look, I think, certainly when kind of COVID hit initially, things seemed to go very, very quiet for the first number of weeks or first couple of months. I think there is more happening now in the last couple of months, and there is investment being done. In terms of being a buyer's market, I'm not 100% certain about that either, because I think to invest into this climate, you've got to take a punt essentially on and take a position on not just what the world will look like post COVID, but how long it's going to take and how long it's going to impact business. So I think where there's opportunities for buyers is looking at businesses that that have managed well through the COVID period, and again, it comes back to having a strong team that have taken the right actions, and through their actions in the midst of the crisis, proven that they're able to deal with rapidly changing circumstances. And come out the other side better, but it does mean taking a bit of a bet on recovery and timing of recovery. And I think as well, one of the challenges is that doing investment, people, if they're going to write a big check, investors typically like to be able to sit across the table from the management team and maybe go out for dinner or go out for a beer with them, and that's a lot more difficult now. When we're all sitting here on video conference. Now, deals are getting done. And in lots of cases, I think these are getting done with investors who may already know a business and have been, looked at the business before, or have some long-standing knowledge of the business and the team. But it is a little bit more difficult.
And I think just to add to that one, because one of our requirements in terms of investment is that we have to sit down with the management team, right? So it's part of due diligence is a personal meeting, because in a personal meeting you see, I can see Feargal now and I can see his reactions, but it's very difficult to see him in full and see, how he responds to certain questions and what his answers are. And so that's a crucial part of due diligence for us. And yeah, it's okay during the next 2-3 months of COVID to probably waive that, but then I think long term we'll have to see if investors are willing to to really do that, and that'll have an impact on how many deals are being done while personal meetings are being restricted. And then when it comes to valuations, I think every crisis has what we would call snakes, right? Those that come and try to steal a deal. But what we've also seen is that those investors quickly develop a reputation for being cheapers. And those are not the investors you see around much when when markets are doing well. So I think that's not an uncommonly seen thing, that during a crisis some are trying to really try it on and get down on startups and and waive a check for very cheap valuations. But I haven't seen this already done.
Sorry, if I may just make a very quick comment on valuation as well. On valuation, there are always two factors. One is your addressable market, like how big can you become, and then whether you can actually back up with an actual number. And so there are always that two factors on the market size, addressable market size, and the year-to-date actual. And because of those two factors, we're now missing one. All the year-to-date, all the latest actuals are not reflecting the potential of the startup. And so now for investors, that we can only rely on figures that are already a few months old and a guess of the addressable market. And so that makes that exercise a lot more challenging.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really hard to know what the addressable market is. From a research company, we're struggling to do a lot of forecasting as we're looking forward, because there's a lot of factors that we just don't know at this point. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to do a quick little virtual speed round. So I'm going to throw out a word or a phrase, and I'd like you all to just come back to me with what pops into your head first. So I'm going to start with you, Suzanna. Trip inspiration startups.
Pass. So that's my
Feargal,
pass.
B2B. Feargal, B2B versus B2C.
B2C.
Sascha, startups focused on cleanliness.
Definitely a look into in the next couple of months.
Sascha, investing into big OTAs.
A no-go.
Feargal, tours and activities.
Oh, not more of that.
Suzanna, blockchain.
Immature.
Sascha, short-term rentals.
Good opportunity.
Feargal, valuations.
Depends on whether I'm buying or selling.
Suzanna, exits.
Future.
Sascha, incubators and accelerators.
Overdone.
Suzanna, access to funding.
Always available.
Feargal, well-funded and bloated or underfunded and lean.
Underfunded and lean all the way.
Suzanna, biometrics.
Hot.
Sascha, world res.
A long time ago.
Feargal, world res.
Sascha screwed me in that deal.
All right, so we've just got a few minutes left. So we're going to do a quick advice clinic where, I'm going to throw out a phrase and I'd like you to provide some advice to the folks in the audience. So what's one piece of advice for startups seeking investment? And maybe, Suzanne, I'll start with you here.
Definitely cast your net very wide. To highlight the fact that you're relevant now, you're relevant for future, and also a good reason for why they should be funding you now.
Sascha?
Be really well prepared. We see lots of startups that come up with great idea, and I think Feargal said this earlier. And when you start digging into it, you see that they haven't done their homework. So, I don't need 50 slides. Give me 20 slides and make sure they're well researched.
Feargal?
Yeah, look, I think it comes back to that. It's know who your customer is, know how much you're going to be able to charge per transaction, do the unit economics work, where's the revenue, does that work? It's great to have a lovely idea, but if the customers and the revenue aren't there, it's not a business.
So the next piece of advice kind of goes along with the question that came in from orally from the audience. So is there a lot of innovation that's going on right now with corporations, with larger corporations? So what do corporations need to do to continue to invest when, their first priority right now in the travel business is cash flow? And do we see a scenario in the future where some of these larger corporations are actually the ones that are producing the unicorns, or are they always just going to be challenged to really fight against that, that corporate bloatedness? So maybe I'll start with you, Feargal, on this one.
Yeah, look, I think there's a real opportunity now in the midst of all this COVID stuff. And look, cash flow has got to be number one, because if you don't have cash, then you're in trouble and you can't pay the bills and you're going to be out of business. But I think that quite often with some later stage businesses that are a little bit bigger and have already developed good revenue streams and probably profitability, right? There's often a reluctance to make changes as fast as they need to be made, because you want to protect what you've already got. So you can't be as nimble as an early stage startup, because you're always worried about your next quarter's earnings numbers and so on. And I think there's a real opportunity now, because everyone in every sector around the world, this year's numbers are blown, and the expectations are limited, and even in public markets, analysts are looking to 2021, 22, 23 even. So I think there's a real opportunity now for some of the bigger companies to just get rid of some of the crap, and take the opportunity to make some of those decisions that they mightn't otherwise, so that they can leave behind some of what's holding them back, whether that's old technology or old product lines or whatever, to take out a sharp knife and cut away the dross and leave yourself with a stronger core business for going forward.
Any last thoughts on this one, Sascha or Suzanna?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is the way how you can turn things around. I think what COVID has shown is that large corporations can learn a lot from startups. Having been worried the first couple of weeks in March about, our portfolio, I was really amazed how good and quick entrepreneurs were in adapting to changing environments in terms of, getting government grants. And, they were first. I'm involved in a couple of mid-sized companies as well. And the startups had done the layoffs, gotten the government funding and, revamped the product by the time that the larger guys started, getting an idea that they need to look into this, right? And I think there's a good reflection on larger corporations to go and look at how they could have better managed the last 6 months, and then what Feargal says is manage better going forward and be more innovative.
Last thoughts,
not
Suzanna?
be afraid.
Sure, absolutely. So being corporations, obviously, during a tough period of time, like we have the responsibility of taking care of customers, taking care of employees. And so those are like definitely very high in terms of the priority. And overall, like when you're in a tough situation, like it focuses mind. And I would say like for Amadeus is that we have already we have always had that partnership mindset, and there are like a couple of the initiatives that we kicked off even pre-COVID in terms of working closer with like even matured companies, startups, in terms of how we can work together. So we have a backbone, like we have like some of the core systems in the industry. How can we work together to help everybody to get out of the current situation? I think that is really, I would say, like a good final remark is like we are in a tough situation. Let's work together and contribute every bit that we can, and let's try to get out of it as quickly as we can.
I think that's an excellent way to end. So thank you very much to Feargal Mooney, Sascha Hausmann, and Suzanna Chiu for being our dragons today, as well as helping us with this panel. So thank you all very, very much.